In 1716, Edward Thatch, more famously known as Blackbeard, was placed in a sloop under the command of another pirate. Only 2 years later, on November 22, 1718, Blackbeard was slashed, shot, killed, and beheaded aboard the ship of the man who slayed him, Lieutenant Robert Maynard. The most immediate turning point produced by Blackbeard's death was the end of his reign of terror on colonial America. However, Blackbeard's death was also a turning point for piracy, politics, and even popular culture for centuries to come. Like a lot of pirates of his era, not much is known about Edward Thatch prior to his pirating spree. His birthplace is unknown, with Bristol, England, and Jamaica the 2 most likely candidates. The most accepted contemporary spelling for his last name is Thatch. As for his profession preceding piracy, some sources claim that he served as a privateer during the War of Spanish Succession, but there is no clear evidence of the following. The most famous description of Blackbeard is penned by Captain Charles Johnson, where Thatch had, quote, assumed the cognomen of Blackbeard from that large quantity of hair, which, like a frightful meteor, covered his whole face, and frightened America more than any comet that has appeared there a long time. Of course, Johnson took creative liberties with the description, but if there are 2 qualities he got right about Blackbeard, it was that he possessed a black beard and that he frightened colonial America. Colonial America was terrified of pirates prior to Blackbeard's death. Merchants, governors, and sailors were all harassed by pirates. As James Logan, successful Philadelphian merchant and William Penn's secretary, put it, quote, we have been extremely pestered with pirates, who now swarm America and increase their numbers by almost every vessel they take. However, it was not until Blackbeard's arrival in North Carolina that significant action was taken by the colonies. Blackbeard was originally the protege of another pirate by the name of Benjamin Hornigold. Both Hornigold and Blackbeard had worked together, and Hornigold had even given one of his prize ships to Blackbeard. What ended this relationship was their royal pardon. On September 5, 1717, the Proclamation for Suppressing of Pirates pardoned all pirates who agreed to surrender to the British Crown. Of course, some officials preferred the implementation of the stick over the carrot. Lieutenant Governor Spotswood of Virginia was an early advocate of the stick, or military force, as he believed that, quote, it is to be questioned whether the latter would be accepted of by all of them. Governor Spotswood would be the one later to bring about the stick and hunt down Blackbeard. When the royal pardon reached the Sound of the Bahamas, where most of the Caribbean pirates had stationed themselves, Benjamin Hornigold, along with some other pirates, were thrilled to receive the pardon, since the pardon would effectively give them an opportunity to lawfully retire to small fortunes and never be punished. However, his crew wasn't as ecstatic, and they promptly overthrew Hornigold as captain. It was around that point that Blackbeard went off independently, plundering the sloop Betty of Virginia. Blackbeard's career had truly begun. Blackbeard sacked many vessels and sloops along the way, but his most famous act of piracy was the 1718 blockade of Charlestown. Blackbeard sealed the city's port shut for an entire week, while the governor met his demands for a chest of medicine. Afterwards, Blackbeard disengaged and sailed northward, towards North Carolina. After the blockade of Charlestown, realizing that the Sound of the Bahamas was no longer suitable for pirates, Blackbeard chose North Carolina as his new haven. North Carolina was a proprietary colony, which meant that the lords proprietors who governed the colony had no interest in investing into the colony beyond what made them money. As a result, North Carolina suffered from poor infrastructure and a lack of government oversight, the perfect breeding ground for piracy. Governor Charles Eden welcomed Blackbeard to his 400-acre estate, where Eden granted Blackbeard's crew the royal pardon. This masked the fact that Blackbeard continued to plunder ships unabated, while North Carolina would get a share of the profits. Lieutenant Governor Spotswood of neighboring Virginia was outraged. He viewed Blackbeard both as a threat to his own interests and as a way to redirect attention from his critics. Also, Spotswood knew that he could make a good profit if he could capture Blackbeard. Finally, he looked at disdain at neighboring North Carolina, and he wanted to demonstrate the weakness of the proprietary system in order to transfer North Carolina under Virginian control. An anti-piracy raid was the perfect excuse to shift people's focus, depose of Governor Charles Eden, and gain the territory. The attack was two-pronged, a drive from the land and a drive from the sea, as Blackbeard could easily evade capture in a small sloop. Governor Spotswood discussed the plan with Captain Ellis Brand of the HMS Pearl and Captain George Gordon of the HMS Lime. They agreed they would need small ships to navigate the outer banks of the Pamlico Sound. The 2 sloops selected, the Ranger and the Jane, would be outfitted as necessary, and Robert Maynard, first lieutenant of the HMS Pearl, would captain the Jane. The soldiers had no cannons on the sloops, but they were armed with muskets, pistols, cutlasses, boarding pikes, axes, daggers, and granados. not much different from the pirates they would face. To quote Governor Spotswood, it was time to expurgate the nest of vipers.
The battle commenced on November 22nd, 1718. The battle was in the offshores of Ocracoke Islands, an island filled with treacherous sandbars. Robert Maynard attacked early dawn, which gave the time for his men to mentally prepare themselves. As for Blackbeard, he and his men were busy partying and getting drunk, so they were completely taken by surprise. They saw two sloops approaching at dawn. When Blackbeard saw these two sloops, he fired a swivel cannon. But when the two sloops kept coming, he cut his ankle cable and prepared to face his enemy. Blackbeard could have easily escaped using his local knowledge, but he couldn't turn out a good fight.
When the Ranger and the Jane were within 100 yards of each other, Robert Maynard received the following words from Blackbeard. Quote, "At a first salutation he drank damnation to me and my men, whom he stilled cowardly puppies, saying he would neither give nor take quarter." Without further ado, Blackbeard fired. Blackbeard used grape shot, perfect for point-blank range. The blast from the Adventure dealt a serious blow to the Ranger's men. As Robert Maynard later recounted, quote, "Immediately we engaged, and Mr. Hyde was unfortunately killed, and 5 of his men wounded in the little sloop." However, the Jane's crew was more spared due to Robert Maynard ordering most of his men below deck prior to the battle. The turning point of the battle came when Blackbeard decided to take the Jane. Confident that the grape shot had done its grisly work, Blackbeard sailed up to the Jane and, after throwing some granados, boarded the Jane with a squadron of his men. Robert Maynard took this chance and unleashed the hidden remainder of his crew from below the decks. This must have been a total shock to Blackbeard, as now the odds were much more even. There are various interpretations of the ensuing duel between Robert Maynard and Edward Thatch, but one of the more accurate ones was penned again by Captain Johnson, where, quote, "he stood his ground and fought with great fury, till he received 25 wounds, 5 of them by shot. As Blackbeard was hacked at from all sides, he finally succumbed to his wounds. Quote, at length, as he was cocking another pistol, having fired several before, he fell down dead." With that, one of the most notorious pirates the world has ever witnessed now lay lifeless. The battle itself had lasted no more than 10 minutes. Robert Maynard promptly defeated the remaining pirates aboard the Adventure and sailed back to Jamestown along with the Ranger. At the bowsprit of the Jane, spinning in the wind, was the trophy of the battle, Blackbeard's head. The most immediate effect of Blackbeard's death was the end of his own crew. Although not all of the 14 surviving pirates were hanged, those who were pardoned quickly dispersed among Bathtown to lead an ordinary civilian life. With that, colonial America no longer had to fear Blackbeard, and there would be no more repeats of Charlestown. Blackbeard's execution also marked a shift from the carrot to the stick. Prior to Ocracoke, royal pardons were issued, and governors negotiated with pirates. After Ocracoke, the executions of Charles Vane, Stede Bonnet, and Jack Carackham promptly followed. Instead of royal pardons, it was now anti-piracy patrols that would quell the high seas. Secondly, Blackbeard's death calmed colonial America. Following the blockade of Charlestown, colonial authorities began overestimating Blackbeard's capabilities. At his height, Blackbeard had a crew of around 700 men, and his Queen Anne's Revenge had boasted between 20 to 30 guns, making the ship one of the most powerful in the Caribbean. If he had joined forces with other pirates, Blackbeard even had the capacity to sack a major port, like Boston or New York. It was his potential that made Blackbeard a terror, not his actual attacks. When Blackbeard's head sailed into Jamestown, colonial authorities across the Atlantic seaboard breathed a sigh of relief. Third, Blackbeard's death ushered in a protracted legal battle between Governor Spotswood and Governor Charles Eden. Governor Spotswood accused Charles Eden and his staff of collaborating with Edward Thatch based on written evidence provided by a salvage letter, which implicated Tobias Knight, Eden's secretary, as having strong relations with Blackbeard. While no one was successfully convicted in the end, and Governor Spotswood did not acquire North Carolina for himself, it did mark the shift of proprietary colonies being placed under the control of royal colonies.
Finally, Blackbeard had a lasting impact on popular culture for centuries to come. According to historian Angus Constam, Blackbeard's notoriety had a lasting impact on the confidence of an emerging nation.
Authors like Captain Charles Johnson and Robert Louis Stevenson would immortalize the man. Even Jack Sparrow, from Pirates of the Caribbean, draws his appearance and deportment from Captain Johnson's description of Blackbeard.
Nowadays, customers are drawn in by Blackbeard's fearsome reputation in locations across America. It was what Blackbeard symbolized as much as what he did that was the turning point. Losing his head would not lose his face to history.